welcome to our show, Health and Wellness, Myths versus Facts. I'm Gargi Rawat. Now, for staying healthy, many nutrients are vitally essential. It's possible to get most of them from a balanced, real food-based diet. The majority of Indians are nutritionally deficient, however. The typical Western diet, which mainly consists of packaged or processed foods, is high in saturated fats and salty snacks is to blame. Furthermore, the diet is low in fruits and vegetables. Junk food consumption has increased as a result of stress and anxiety. Our dietary patterns have changed and nutrient deficiency has developed as a result. The most prevalent deficiency is iron and calcium deficiency. Due to the lockdown, people hardly went out and many suffering from vitamin D3 deficiency. Now, iron, calcium and vitamin D3 deficiency is more common in women and children. But it's also common in people with chronic diseases and various comorbid conditions. We have an expert panel that will guide us regarding the effect of these minerals and vitamin deficiency in people with metabolic disorders. Well, let's go across now to Dr. Vishal Rastogi, interventional cardiologist, head Advanced Heart Failure Program, Fortis Escorts Heart Institute, New Delhi. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us. And anemia is the most common blood condition worldwide. Now, there are many causes of anemia. Most people know about iron deficiency anemia. What is anemia of a chronic disease, and what is the most common cause of anemia?
Thank you. Thank you, Gargi. Thank you for having me here. So, this, as the name suggests, anemia of chronic disease is the anemia which is associated with the chronic illnesses. And it is also called anemia of inflammation because it affects people who have inflammatory diseases such as chronic infections, autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis, lupus erythematosus, psoriasis, cancer, also patients with chronic kidney disease and heart failure. So while it is very easy to differentiate from iron deficiency anemia, because in patients with iron deficiency anemia, the iron stores are either low or normal. While in this, the iron stores are normal or high. However, the iron available in the bloodstream is low. That means that the iron which is available to do the day-to-day processes like hemopoiesis is less. The RBCs, which are the major carrier of hemoglobin, they also have very shortened survival because of these chronic diseases which can destroy them. Also, the erythropoietin is less, which can lead to reduction in the generation of RBCs. While typically the disease of chronic illness anemia is the anemia is of mild degree, lower degree. Occasionally it can be severe and may require blood transfusion. Generally, if we just treat the underlying chronic condition, the anemia gets better.
All right, doctor, so anemia can be temporary or long-term and can range from mild to severe. Anemia can lead to many serious complications. And does anemia increase the risk of heart failure?
Right. So anemia and heart failure are very, very closely related. Iron deficiency, with or without anemia, can be there in chronic heart failure patients. And in fact, the diagnosis and treatment of iron deficiency is a very important therapeutic target to improve the quality of life in these very, very sick patients. On the other hand, severe anemia per se can lead to heart failure, which is known as high output heart failure. That means the heart is otherwise normal, but it is required to pump more blood because the blood is not having enough oxygen. So the tissues are not getting enough oxygen. So the heart has to pump harder to meet the demand of oxygen of the body tissues. So this heart needs to work harder and harder. Of course, it can sustain for some time, but it cannot do so indefinitely. And this can lead to heart failure. This can be treated. If you just treat anemia, the heart failure can get better because the heart is not at fault. The anemia is causing the heart to pump harder. That's why the problem is there.
All right, that's what, how this problem arises. Doctor, so what is the role of serum iron and ferritin testing in the diagnosis of iron deficiency anemia, and when should a person do it?
Right. So these tests are required to determine body's total iron storage and to diagnose whether patient has iron deficiency and in some cases iron overload. So serum iron is the measurement of the amount of iron which is in transit in the body. That means the iron which is attached to transferrin and is present in the bloodstream. While ferritin reflects the storage iron and is the marker of absolute iron storage in the body. So the available iron in the blood, which is the serum iron, can vary on a day-to-day basis. Depending on the demand of the body, the iron can be released and you can find the levels which vary. While the ferritin levels are more accurate measure of the overall iron in the body. That said, the ferritin is also an acute phase reactant and the levels can be high in patients with acute illnesses like infection, and we have seen in COVID phase that ferritin was a marker of disease severity. So the ferritin levels guidelines change according to the presence or absence of any other chronic illness which is there in the body. So these tests must be done once in 2-3 years in healthy individuals just to understand the status. However, we need to do these tests if we need to diagnose the cause of anemia or the low hemoglobin that the patient has been diagnosed, or even if the patient has a problem of just feeling weak and lethargic, because iron deficiency per se can lead to all these symptoms.
All right, we're also joined by Dr. Sheetal Rathore, consultant physician, Dr. Shankar Rao Chavan, Government Medical College and Hospital. Thank you so much, doctor, for joining us on the program as well. And we're talking about anemia and its impact on health. And doctor, when we talk about anemia, we talk about pregnant women and children. How does the prevalence of anemia vary between males and females, and which type of anemia is the most common?
Anemia is a state in which the blood hemoglobin is below the normal range for the patients according to his age and sex. For male, we consider if it is below 13 gram per dl, and for the female, if it is below 12 gram per dl, we consider it is an anemia. It is one of the most common nutritional diseases observed globally in developing as well as in developed countries. Its prevalence is inordinately higher among the developing nations because of low socioeconomic status, indigent access to the healthcare services, poverty, inadequate diet, certain diseases, pregnancy, and lactation. Young people are particularly susceptible for this iron deficiency for their rapid growth and associated with high iron requirements. Iron deficiency is found to be the most common form of anemia. Globally, 50% of anemia is attributed to iron deficiency anemia. For dietary source, for the iron, we have to eat green leafy vegetables, onions, cereals, pulses, jaggery, dates, iron fruits, iron-rich fruit like banana, pomegranate, olives, and animal food like liver, fish, kidney, egg yolk, and meat, red meat. So the food rich with vitamin C also enhances the absorption of iron.
All right, and Dr. Sheetal, diabetes affects almost all organs of the body. So can diabetes be responsible for anemia directly or indirectly? And does anemia affect glucose metabolism?
Yes, diabetes can cause anemia by various mechanisms. The prevalence of diabetes has increased because of the increased population, increased urbanization, sedentary lifestyle, obesity, and increased survival rate. High blood glucose predisposes to many inflammatory conditions by rising the inflammatory markers. What this basically inflammatory marker does? They are responsible for micro and macrovascular complications in diabetic patients, like eye damage we call as a retinopathy, nerve damage we call as a neuropathy, and kidney damage, nephropathy, heart diseases, strokes. So these inflammatory markers causes complications. Longer the duration of uncontrolled diabetes, higher the inflammatory process is there. Erythropoietin is an hormone that is produced primarily by the kidney. What is erythropoietin does? Basically, it has a key role in production of the red blood cells, that is erythropoiesis. And in diabetic affected kidney, it does not produce the enough amount of erythropoietin, so ultimately leading an anemia. Also, as I mentioned about the inflammatory markers, interleukin 6 has an anti-erythropoietic effect, which causes immature red blood cells progenitor death. So both these mechanism causes anemia in diabetic mellitus patient. But in iron deficiency anemia can spuriously lead high HbA1c level, that is a glycosylated hemoglobin in diabetic patient, even if their plasma glucose levels are within the normal limit. So in diabetic patient, before altering their treatment regime, we should rule out the iron deficiency anemia.
All right. Now, Dr. Vishal Rastogi, other than these deficiencies, which nutrient deficiencies are common in people with metabolic disorders?
So, as you have rightly mentioned, that calcium is one of the important deficiency which is important. Other than that, vitamin deficiencies, including the vitamin B12 and other deficiencies, are very common. And this can easily be treated by taking supplements in the form of or having healthy diet, first of all, so that these deficiencies don't occur.
Right, Dr. Sheetal, type 1 diabetes comes with many complications, and some of the complications that are known about. Is iron deficiency common with type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, basically people generally don't know. Type 1 diabetes mellitus, it is a condition in which your body immune system destroys the insulin making cells, that is beta isolates of Langerhans, that is present in the pancreas. So there will be either lack or a complete absence of insulin levels. This type of diabetes mellitus usually occurs in children or young adults. So it is also called as a juvenile diabetics or insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. Diabetes does not directly cause anemia, but certain complications and conditions associated with diabetes can contribute to anemia. Because of persistent high blood sugar levels, inflammatory process is also high, leading to high risk for developing the diabetic nephropathy, chronic kidney diseases, which ultimately decreases the intestinal iron absorption also, and decrease the production of erythropoietin also, so leading to causes of anemia. So our goal in type 1 diabetes mellitus is to maintain euglycemia during the most part of the day by aggressive insulin therapy to avoid the complications in type 1 diabetes mellitus.
All right, with that, we'll slip into a short break. You're watching Health and Wellness, Myths versus Facts. We'll return with more questions. Welcome back. You're watching Health and Wellness, Myths versus Facts, and we're also talking today about diabetes, anemia, and vitamin D deficiency. Let's go across to our doctors with all our questions. Dr. Sheetal Rathore, due to poor eating habits, most people are deficient in calcium. Also, due to working from home and lockdown, we hardly, got out, and we hardly got sufficient vitamin D3. So, how do calcium and vitamin D deficiency affect diabetes and heart health?
Yeah. Vitamin D plays a significant role in regulation of calcium and maintenance of the phosphorus levels in the blood, and these factors are vital for the healthy bones. Vitamin D supports immune system by helping the immune cell proliferation and differentiation. Vitamin D regulates insulin levels also and support diabetic management. It also supports the lung function and cardiovascular system also. Vitamin D affects glucose metabolism by inhibiting the lymphocyte proliferation and improves the body's sensitivity to insulin and reduces the risk of insulin resistance. So if vitamin D continues for the longer period, it may result as an complications complications like cardiovascular diseases, autoimmune diseases, neurological diseases, pregnancy related complications, and repeated infections also. Regarding calcium, the major quantum of calcium is used in the formation of the bone and health. Calcium is essential for transmission of the nerve impulses also, for the muscle contraction. It helps in pumping the blood, and also regulates the blood pressure, and most important, it also takes part in the blood coagulation system also.
All right. Now, Dr. Rastogi, diet is a crucial part of any chronic disease management. What type of diet would you suggest for people with heart disease to get the optimum amount of calcium and vitamin D3?
Right. So for decades, doctors have encouraged people to consume plenty of calcium, a mineral which is best known for building bones. Calcium also keeps our muscles, which include the heart muscles, healthy. It keeps the nerves and blood vessels also working well, and is one of the key minerals which involved in the blood pressure control also. On the other hand, as Dr. Sheetal also highlighted, the vitamin D is also very important for heart health. And a lot of studies point to the vitamin D deficiency as a risk factor for heart attacks, heart failure, high BP, and also stroke. In fact, there's some controversy regarding the calcium because a very important test that we do to understand the blockages in the heart is a calcium scoring in the coronary arteries. And those patients who have blockages, they have deposits of calcium there. And because of this, it was thought to diagnose whether this excessive calcium intake is responsible for blockages. And it was found that this is not a cause and effect relationship, but a relationship which was found that patients who were taking a lot of calcium supplements in the form of tablets, they had higher incidence of heart diseases. Though, as I said, it's not a causal relationship which has been established yet, but still, it is just recommended that we should take calcium supplement in the form of oral diet rather than actual tablet form. And the top foods which are rich in calcium and vitamin D are milk and dairy products, green leafy vegetables like spinach, like mushroom, like soybean, some fish like sardines, salmon. They're also very rich in calcium, and also egg yolk is rich in calcium. So we should take more of these foods.
All right, Doctor, you spoke about, supplements and people taking a lot of supplements. Dr. Rathore, if you could also tell us about that. Should people take iron and calcium supplements after a specific age, and are supplements good for our overall health?
Yeah, iron and calcium are some of the most essential mineral for the optimum health and well-being. They are crucial to the balanced diet. Total body iron content is 4 gram, and 60% of that is in hemoglobin, that is used for the formation of the red blood cells, that is we call as a erythropoiesis. It boosts immunity also, and iron important for the brain function also. Daily requirement of the iron for the male is 1 milligram, for the female is 2 milligram, and for a pregnant and lactating mother it is 3 milligram per day. Daily requirement of the calcium for an adult is 500 milligram. For the pregnant and lactating woman, it is 1200 milligram. And that of postmenopausal woman, it increased up to 1200 to 1500 milligram per day. So as Sir Vishal sir said, that dietary source include the milk, cheese, yogurt, egg, fish, green leafy vegetables, peanuts, dry foods containing almonds. So 100 cc of milk contains 100 mg of calcium. Accordingly, we should decide. There is one recent study has been done that shows there is a reduced fall and fracture rates have been documented among the individual who have the greater vitamin D and the calcium levels. Supplements are always good for overall health, but they never be a substitute for the balanced nutritional diet.
All right, Dr. Rastogi, is there something you'd like to add to that? Regarding supplements, I think over this last 1.5 years or so, everybody's started taking a lot of supplements, and you spoke about people taking calcium or vitamin D. So, what is your view on that? About is there a specific age after which maybe you shouldn't take them?
So, as Dr. Sheetal very clearly pointed out, that calcium is necessary for those people who have calcium deficiency. And in fact, if you have osteoporosis or if you have diseases of the bones where the fracture risk is high, supplement of calcium may be necessary. But if purely for a heart, the calcium supplements are not necessary. And as Dr. Sheetal pointed out, there is no substitute for balanced diet where we take food which is healthy, which has all the nutrients which are required for our day-to-day performance, and that's the best.
All right. Well, thank you so much, doctors, for taking out time and answering all the questions for us on the program, Health and Wellness, Myths versus Facts. Thank you all for watching. Goodbye.